Welcome to Soul Therapy with Chelle. I am Chelle Griffin and I practice as a soul doula. I combine therapeutic knowledge and lived experience with a healthy dose of spiritual exploration. Feel welcome to join me as we learn and grow together, exploring the magic and wonderment of experiencing life on earth as a spiritual being. Welcome to another episode of Soul Therapy with Chelle, and I'm joined today by the absolute gorgeous, you are going to love this woman, the beautiful Elinor Moshe. And Elinor is based in Melbourne and she's here to share her life with us, her life story, and how her soul came to open and reconstruct her life. And reconstruct feels like, I don't know why that just popped in for me, but obviously Elinor has published 4 books. She worked in the construction industry and she has books published in the early 2020s, Constructing Your Career, Secrets of the Construction Industry. I won't go into every single one of them because we'll be here forever, but Elinor is a young gun in her industry and she's here today to dive in to when that all shifted and how her life opened up and changed. And I'm really curious to bring you on board here, Elinor, and share what that catalyst moment was, what pivoted for you and for you to become the woman you are today. Welcome.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much, Chelle. And I love the name of your show because it's also the name of our shamans, like the shaman that we see. It's his business name. And I kept on getting the name wrong. Is it Souls Therapies? And I kept on getting the plural wrong. And this was an ongoing joke with my then best friend, now partner, because when we are on the path, but especially early on, we were looking for, I guess, more heavy duty consciousness work, like really needing to get out and clear that etheric body. And we started coming to gnosis of all the cosmic crap that we are carrying and how these invisible layers, but they are visible, they're just in our non-ordinary reality, are keeping us bound, are keeping us playing out this character, this version of ourselves, which is not us because of all these attachments that we are carrying. So when I saw the name of your show, it took me back to, when we started seeing the shaman and starting coming to build a close relationship with these different aspects of ourselves. So very excited to be here and share, different perspectives to people who are on this path and serve them what they need as well, if it works. So thank you.
Well, it's so lovely to have you here. And so that brings us to, you've been working with a shaman. Is that how you experience this soul shift, or do you want to talk me through those moments where the veil started to lift and clarity started, or questions were coming up and seeking clarity?
Absolutely. The first spiritual awakening, call it what you want, but it's the soul coming through. And that first happened in 2021. There were a lot of external paradigms that crashed down. Think of it as the tower card from the tarot. And it wasn't one tower, it was the totality of my perception of how the world is run and how the world works, which came down. There was, of course, so much happening in the world. And that was on top of working in very toxic work environments, especially it came from a pharmaceutical project, which was meant to be, where we identify pharma as healthcare, but they're actually very much in the business of sick care, very much in the business of profit. And I had never felt worse working with those teams, with those people, in those environments. And that started even before things were playing out dramatically in the world. I started seeing the logical inconsistencies because I was right in it. And putting on top of that, toxic teams, everything that was wrong systematically was all coming to a head in this environment. And at the same time, that was when I was seeking to also build myself out of this, because I realized this can't be it. So the first spiritual awakening happened when there was so much happening in the world and push came to shove, and you realize that you're either going to stand up for higher values or you won't. There was a lot of, the dust needed to settle for quite some time. And there was a lot of integration as to how do I even orient myself in the world at this point. But then slowly but surely from that point, I started making inferior, I'll call them inferior decisions for myself in my own career. So it's like, when you put a frog in water, that, and the water starts boiling and boiling, but you don't feel it straight away. And this also started to crescendo in 2023 when, for the first time in a very long time, I went overseas. Now, I was 32 and I was going overseas with my parents. Now, that should not be alarming, but that was the only thing that was also happening for me in my life. There was nothing else. By then, I had my internal reality was also playing out in my, I don't say external, but my personal and professional started mirroring each other. There were the same patterns, the same level of martyrdom that was happening, that same level of soul abrasion that was happening because of who I was surrounding myself internally, in the home and externally in my professional life. Yet it seemed to be phenomenal from the outside. People would have killed over to be in my position, but the house was on fire. But I didn't realize that until I had to get a 30,000 foot view. So I'll fast forward a little bit. I was in Israel. We were visiting family. Cousin invited me out for dinner. And my mother, quote unquote, would not let me walk 600 meters to dinner by myself. And I had an absolute meltdown because this was the crescendo of, not the crescendo, but this was an absurd peak of being a 32-year-old woman and, quote unquote, not allowed to do something. And this was reflective of decades of my life. These are not isolated events. This was the chain just playing out, or the cage playing out. And I did go to dinner, and the next day I was in such a deep depression. And I had been for quite some time, but not coming to terms with it because I'm successful. You're not allowed to feel sad. We gave you everything. You have everything. Look at how much you achieved in the world. You should be happy. Narrative.
Yeah.
Fast forward the next day, I was messaging my then best friend, now partner, Daniel, and explaining, what happened. And he gave me the concept of the devouring mother. And I never heard of it beforehand, and I looked it up. And that's when the soul came through. That evening, for the first time, I cried from the soul. I cried from such a deep sadness and realizing that I stopped existing in my reality. It's not that parts of me were even around. The parts were there had so much deadness to them, and I had just been crushed under the devouring nature of paternal and maternal impactors internally and externally to my world. And I remember that day vividly, the 31st of March 2023. I celebrate that day because that was the breakdown that I did not know how I would get through out of this. And it wasn't like I hadn't tried beforehand. I tried conventional methods and models. This wasn't the first time, but the conscious faculties had fried themselves, and I was left with, what now? And I did not know. But the unconscious forces came to aid. And there were other events during that 1 month that tested my resolve. But that's when conviction kicked in, and I looked myself dead straight in the eye, and I told myself, I will get myself out of this. I have no idea how, but I will move these unconscious mountains. And then, of course, the path kept on unraveling itself. And we can continue, but I'll leave it there for now and hand it back to you.
I love how that unraveling is what you were experiencing, and then the moving forward was also another deeper unraveling. That they say the world works in mysterious ways, but does it? It's that we're just waiting here for you to start noticing, start getting curious, start questioning, what's the meaning of all this? Why am I here? What's my purpose? And whilst I'm not really attached to purpose as such, but it's what's my mission, I guess, and why have I come into this lifetime to create and experience and manifest. And it's not until we start to have those moments of like deep unwinding and breaking down that we're able to start looking for that clarity. And that's when the universe steps in and says, hooray, you're here.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the cheers and the parades, and now we're going to lay the path for you, and all you have to do is just continually show up. What next? Unravel that, face that, release that, okay, what next? And just go through those layers of awakening and coming to that place of peace, which happens along the way. It's not this, I know for me, my very first Gestalt therapy session, my therapist asked, like, what is it you're looking for? I went, peace. And I, like, my voice said it before my head caught up to it. I went, oh, that was my heart speaking, not my head. Actually, that is really what I'm seeking, peace. And it's not everlasting peace and being in a constant state of peace and bliss. It's creating the space for peace to be there and to come in and to be able to sit with it and feel gratitude and acknowledgement for all the moments that weren't peaceful, that have been able to allow you to be there. And it sounds like that experience with your mum was one of many that activated your soul awakening. And then it sounds like you had this beautiful, I don't know that mentor's the right word, but ally in Daniel, just gently present, going, what about this? Have you thought of this? Or, and there, it sounds like he was really validating your experience as well, which beautiful support. Would you like to speak more to the unraveling of friendship to relationship with Daniel?
Absolutely. And you touch on a fantastic point when people experience this stage in their life. If they do in this lifetime, you don't have allies, or the people that you think will be there have only really fallen in love with the deeply wounded versions of yourself that they are familiar with that really pacify their own shadow.
Yes.
But so when you start getting too big for your boots kind of thing, they're not necessarily the ones who are going to be there, because it would force them to confront all that is in their repressed shadow. And we very well know how much, humanity is not all in for shadow work just yet. But and I'm still in touch with her, I had my shadow work coach, and she was the one who also put a spanner in my paradigm with astrology. This was in January 2023. And I went into that astrology reading. She's just going to validate everything that I know, because I know everything, because I'm a strong, independent woman and there's nothing wrong in my life. And if I just wake up at 5 a.m. and hustle a little bit more, then I will get myself out of this. No. And the first thing that she said was, you got to get out of here. And I'm like, why? And then she's like, she gave me the validation as well of the mother wound being the highest point on my chart. And I'm like, how did you know that? Because no one's been able to see that. And the way that our life, I'm an only child. I have parents here. We don't have any family here. We are an isolated system in a vacuum that has no external influence until my partner came along to really shake up the triangulation and the enmeshment and the parentification. Call it what you want. It's people not living in their sovereign nature. So I was very lucky to have her to constantly shatter my psyche every week. And I would go back to Daniel, who his true nature, and he's of course on the path too, and he's a mystic by nature, but he has a phenomenal ability to question everything and to see past everything and to see through everything. And that was something that started bringing us closer together personally, because we started off as friends talking about the philosophies of the world and everything that's going wrong. And then it took us around 14 to 16 months to even start showing a fragment of our personal self. That's how guarded and shut off from that we were. And then we started seeing similarities in our story. It's like early 30s, living at home, society's not working for us, things are breaking down, our patterns of life in childhood, age 4, this happened, and we started cottoning onto similarities. And then we started on the path, and that started opening up more avenues. So when I would open up a door, he would open up another door, and we kept on doing that. And okay, I wanted to see this, and we needed to do this work, and we started doing a lot of the work separately but together as well, and investigating all of these avenues. Fast forward a little bit, I started my podcast and I met a regressionist. And I've been looking to do a past life regression. Daniel had already did one, because even though I started doing the energy work and the Kundalini awakening and the breath work and the 9D this and full circle that, things weren't necessarily shifting. They were, but I still felt like we both do, given, our lot in life, as Daniel calls it. We needed the heavy duty consciousness work, really to stick your arm into the gunk and pull stuff out. He already did a past life regression here, and he had a great experience, relatively good experience for this, starting off. And I was meant to do one here, but the date didn't work. So I told him, we're going up to Brisbane, but also it's optional. So we call it today an optional obligation. And he said yes, to my absolute delight. I'm like, you sure? Because this is a commitment. And like, we're super best friends by this stage. But we were the last two people to find out that we're in love with each other. And we go up to Brisbane. He has a regression, and he experienced lives of the divine masculine, which is something that has been absent from his life. So he was in there for quite some time. And I'll just quickly reverse before that. We were at the market, and there was a tarot reader, and we sat down and asked, the tarot reader, hey, could you find out if we have a past life together? And apparently we did. We have many, beyond comprehension many. And we were lovers in a past life that died together, but not by accident. And we were like, okay. And unconsciously, to me, that started validating the nature of our relationship, because Daniel has this ability to always know what I want and what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling, and to always say the right thing at the right time, kind of thing. Like, that's that unconscious resonance. That doesn't come from ego level. So that night we did a tarot reading. We tried to find a few more details, and then we did a tarot reading for this life. And the crux of it was, something needs to change here, otherwise you risk losing each other. And that was horrible to even fathom, that we would not ever be in each other's lives. I didn't sleep well that night. And the next morning it was the regression. And as soon as Daniel comes out of the regression, he looked straight through me, like into my soul, kind of. He came out of that regression. The energy was so different.
Wow.
4 hours later, we find ourselves in a relationship. And this is not something that we ever thought. We both conceded to the fact that we won't have relationships. We're too broken, too much garbage. Our life is not set up in our mid-30s to even accommodate for a relationship, kind of thing. By that point, we'd both conceded. And he'd had one relationship before, not a great one. I'd never really been on, my whole 20s, I'd never really been on a date, or have definitely not been out on a second date. And I was not someone who was asked out, kind of thing, or just met people, because my energy was never my own. I was never me in the world. I was all but my mother's daughter. So we find ourselves in a relationship 4 hours after the regression, as Daniel was still under the influence of the higher self, and then asked the question, do you think we should try something between us? And that was the most peaceful and whole yes that I'd ever given in my life. And that night we experienced, we actually felt our souls merge. We actually felt the energy between us start to move. It was surreal. And just, we woke up the next morning and it felt like we just shifted timelines, which we had, obviously, because that old timeline, that couldn't have happened. And the year that followed, well, that's the next part.
I love hearing about that dissolution of an old timeline, and that quantum leap into a new one, and feeling that immediate effect, and being aware of that shift, because for a lot of people we search for that, and it's not until sort of after the fact that you can look back and go, oh, that was that moment that it, like, a new path was formed and a new timeline took shape. And so I really love hearing about that. That's really exciting. Gosh,
We were not ones to believe that reality could change in an instant. And this is just one representation of the magic that's available when you choose to heal, when you choose to explore different dimensions within yourself. When you seek to, as you were speaking about in the first place, go to your heart. That's one place we had never been before. And we are now, like, Daniel's a certified regressionist, I'm in training, but we asked our higher self in a regression, did our hearts know, when we first met each other, and we met each other dealing on a crane permit, when I was in that toxic site, he was in an equally toxic environment, and we met over an email, and we asked if our hearts knew, and they're like, of course, like we didn't even get the question out, but our hearts knew who and what they wanted. It was the conditioning which prevented them from seeing, from the ego self from cottoning onto that. And the hearts worked very hard to get us here. So I can only imagine the victory that they felt in the moment, where they're like, yes, we did it.
That concludes part 1 of my conversation with Elinor Moshe. And tune in next week and we will continue the conversation. And Elinor goes into explaining her experience of past life regression and her connection with Daniel and how it's strengthened in its leaps and bounds. Thank you for showing up for yourself by listening to Soul Therapy with Chelle. Feel welcome to subscribe to my podcast, share the pod with your friends, family, colleagues and neighbours. And please, if you are willing, I would absolutely love a 5-star review to give my little pod a boost in the algorithms. For further detail on how to work with me, please visit my website www.chellegriffin.com or find me on the socials. I hope you'll join me on my next episode. Till then, go gently and intentionally. With care, Chelle.